ahead and do the recording. Hey friends, it's John Assaraf, CEO of Praxis Now, and welcome to another one of my amazing interviews with world-renowned leaders, thought masters, and individuals who are making it happen in the real world of business and the real world of personal development. With me is a fellow countryman, my friend Nir Eyal, and he writes, consults, and teaches about the intersections of psychology, which you know I love, brain research, technology, and business. And he's got this killer book that I happened to get like an advanced copy of just a little while ago called Hooked. And it's really coming out in a big way around the world. I want you all to pay close attention to what we talk about today and pick up 1, 2, or 3 copies for yourself and to give away. And this book is about how to build habit-forming products, but also it's really, really amazing what he's discovered in human behavior and how do you really understand your own habits, what's causing you to take action towards what you want, what is holding you back from achieving what you want, why are habits so hard to break and so hard to make. And he's got an amazing background, and he's also a very successful entrepreneur, which you know I love. He's founded 2 tech companies since about 10, 11 years ago. He's taught at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. He's also been just an amazing contributor to Forbes, TechCrunch, Psychology Today. And what I can share with you is what we're about to talk about is going to transform your life. So get a pen ready, paper ready, take copious notes, and we're talking about Hooked. Nir, thanks for doing this with me, my friend.
Thank you so much for letting me come. This is fantastic. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Awesome. So you and I share some very, very similar passions of business, psychology, the brain, habits, and you've had a chance, obviously, to study at Stanford with one of the leading experts as well in the world, B.J. Fogg, and between the research you did there on consumer behavior, what gets people hooked on products and services, and what causes habits, you've got a really deep, amazing understanding on how anybody could take, whether it's their product or service, and get people to want to use them and use them frequently. But you also have had a phenomenal insight into human behavior that anybody could use to make their lives better as well. So maybe we can start with what really got you, fascinated with this field that is, earth-shattering right now, in my opinion.
Right. No. So there's my entry into the world of habits and how products change our habits actually started from the last company that I founded. It was at the intersection of gaming and advertising, and these 2 industries are really all about mind control. If you think about it, games are really about engaging people in these repeat behaviors, and of course, advertising in the U.S. alone, $28 billion industry, and people don't spend this money for naught. It's because it drives user behavior. And what I found, and what I was surprised to discover, is that these 2 industries were using these techniques. They were using the psychology of how to influence human behavior, but they didn't actually have the terminology or the science or the academic background to really know why these things were working. They just know they did. And so what I was looking for after my last company was acquired was to figure out how to build habit-forming products. I had a thesis at that time that if I was going to start another company, it would have to be something that was habit-forming. But I didn't really see a guidebook out there for how to build habits into our products. And so, I really believe that we're on the precipice of an age where we can build habits for good, that we can help people live happier, healthier, more productive, more connected lives by using the power of habits. And so that's why I wrote this book. Number 1, it was to help entrepreneurs, to help business owners figure out how to build healthy habits in people's lives. The second reason was that around this same time, my daughter had become acquainted with the iPad, and at the time she was about 18 months old. And from her first interaction with technology when she was just 18 months old to where she is today, I can see how much she is influenced by technology. And of course, within myself, I can see how influenced I am by technology. Sure. And so I really think that it's important to understand the psychology of how products influence our behavior, particularly these technology products, so that we can become smarter users of this technology and avoid unwanted manipulation where we don't want these products to change our behavior in ways that aren't healthy.
And it's interesting, you got some a young daughter. I've got 2 boys who are 18 and 19, and in my world with them, I see them with the cell phone in one hand, iPad in another, television on, and possibly one other bit of technology, and they're just using it like never seen before. And so I'm fascinated with the neuroscience of habits and the neuropsychology of habits. And so if we can take a look at it, I wrote down a few questions that maybe we can get started with. How are habits formed, in individuals? And then why are they so hard to break once you have that habit formed?
Right. So habits are these behaviors.
Can you just raise your volume a little bit, please?
Sure. So habits are these behaviors that are done with little or no conscious thought. It turns out it's about 40% of what we do day in and day out, whether you like it or not. These behaviors are driven by these impulses, by these behaviors that we do with little or no conscious thought. And once we become accustomed to these routines, once our brain relies upon these routines, then it's very hard to break these habits. And from an evolutionary perspective, this stuff is great. It's fantastic that we have habits, because if we didn't have habits, we'd have to decide and contemplate and go back and forth on every single decision. Well, habits can help us do these behaviors automatically with little or no conscious thought. And of course, we can spend much more time of our conscious attention on things that are more important at that moment. The opportunity here, of course, is that I think that there's all kinds of products and technologies that can help us live better lives by using the power of habit to help us live healthier, more connected, happier lives. But then there's also these threats as well that we should consider in our lives, that, how much are we giving up by being so dependent on certain gadgets? And so my work is really focused on the product side, on how, if you're building a business, if you're building a company, how can you use habits for good for your users? But then also in our own lives, how can we deconstruct these habits in our lives to make sure that we have the habits we want, and that we can break the habits that we don't want?
Love it. So if somebody wants to develop a new habit, and I wrote something that I really loved in your book called LIFO, which I'd actually never heard before. And so let me just lower my volume over here on my end. I'm getting a little reverberation. So I've heard of LIFO, is last in, first out. And so can we maybe just touch a bit upon that and what you discovered with last in, first out as far as habits go?
Right. So that principle has to do with the fact that our oldest habits are the ones that we keep with us. Right. So the habits we learned as children follow us through life. Those are our oldest habits, our oldest routines. And so you think about the stuff that people rarely change that was formed in their childhood, their religion, their political affiliation, their accent, all of these things are learned behaviors that are very difficult to change the older we get, because they're formed very early in life. So from a business perspective, from a business challenge, businesses are constantly developing new products and new interactions and hoping to form new habits with customers. The problem is that the habits that are last in, the most recent habit that we have acquired, are the ones that we usually boot out first, right? So everybody knows this routine of January 1st comes and we've all got our New Year's resolution and we made it to the gym for a week, and then, schedules get busy, and for one reason or another, we're just not able to keep up our routine, and that's the first thing that slips.
And so that is part of the automatic behavior that we develop in our brain's way of using less energy and focusing all of our attention on survival and, not being in a state of pain or fear. How does somebody decide and keep a habit that they know is going to be more constructive than one that is destructive to the goals that they want to achieve then?
Right. So I lay out this basic framework that I call a hook. And I lay this framework out for people who are building products, who are developing these innovations and hoping to form healthy habits in people. And these hooks they have 4 basic steps. Every hook starts with a trigger, to an action, then a reward, and finally an investment.
So trigger, action, reward, investment.
Exactly. The acronym I like to use for those of you who are of my generation, if you remember Atari, remember the Atari video games? Yep. ATARI. So a hook has 4 parts: trigger, action, reward, and investment. Nice. So these 4 steps we find repeated time and time again in all sorts of habit-forming products. The trick. emotion.
Yeah.
These emotions that when we feel these negative emotions, they tend to be negative emotions. When we feel them, we seek relief. And so, from a neuroscience perspective, it turns out that our brains, one thing that our brains do incredibly well is form patterns, is to understand these causal relationships. So, if we can find some sort of solution to our pain points, and then that solution provides relief, we begin to form these association with these internal triggers. So, I'll give you an example. You're feeling lonesome, and what website do many people turn to? Well, they hop onto Facebook instead. You're feeling uncertain. You don't know the answer to something. And before we scan our brain, we instantly are off to Google. And what about when you're feeling bored? Between 2 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you have that big project you don't really want to finish right now. Well, that would be a great time to automatically check YouTube or Pinterest or stock prices or sports scores. Lots of solutions for this internal trigger of boredom.
And so that's the trigger. Then there's the automatic behavior, and then there's the reward. And when you talk about the investment, where would that fit in? Are you talking about investment of time? I'd love to understand that last part of it.
Right. So that's kind of a unique aspect of habit forming products. So anytime you have this feedback loop, and this has been in the psychology research for years and years, of a trigger action reward, that's infinite, right? If you can do that enough
Yep.
times through operant conditioning, an organism will learn that behavior. But with products specifically, there's this investment phase where the user puts something into the product, some
Got
kind
it.
of effort into the product in the form of data, in the form of accruing followers, in the form of content, or even a skill. Learning a particular behavior can be a form of investment. And what's so important about that investment is that it brings the user back. It brings the user back and makes them more likely to go through the steps of the book in the future.
And so, if you're a business owner that wants to get people hooked on your products or services, that is a really good model to follow. And what I'm hearing in the investment phase as well is how do you get that engagement so that they've got some skin in the game that then rewards them and creates the trigger, etc. That's the loop that you want to do?
For an online business, it could be something if you use Twitter, accruing followers, right? The more investment you make in your follower base. If you use a product like Pinterest or Facebook, the more data you give the company. Or Mint.com, if you use a personal finance software, the more data you give the company, the better the product is for you. But even there's offline examples. For example, some kind of customer loyalty program where if the user gets a punch card punched, well, we know that the closer you get to finishing that punch card, the more likely you are to come back. In fact, there was a great study that showed that if you they did a study at a car wash where they give one set of users 6 punches, the other set of customers 8 punches with 2 filled out, with 2 already punched. Right? Same number. It takes still both cases take 6 punches to get the free car wash. But of course, the ones who had the 2 pre-punched, those are the ones who got the free car wash sooner. Those are the ones who completed the action sooner. Why? Because they felt like they were already invested. They already had stored value into that service. And so that's this whole principle of investment.
I love that. And this is really where the neuromarketing and the neuro sales start to intersect is we're gaining so much new information on human psychology and behavior. So my brain is taking me into two different directions. One is, so how do we as consumers protect ourselves from being manipulated? And then on the second half of that question is then how do we use this information to actually make ourselves more productive, more apt to achieve our own goals?
Right. These are great questions, and I love the ethical side of this. In fact, I devote a whole chapter in the book. The chapter is titled "The Morality of Manipulation," because I
Yep.
want people to think about it as they're using this technology, as they're using the deeper psychology of human behavior and how to use that for good. Hopefully, I also want them to consider the moral implications of changing people's behavior,
Right.
of manipulating people to meet their ends, right, to their business goals. So I think that entrepreneurs have a very special responsibility now that this information is out there, and it's been out there for way before my book. I just kind of collated it so that we can use this for good. We as consumers need to take part as well. So not only is there responsibility on the maker side, but we as consumers need to think about this stuff. So let me give you an example in my own life.
Sure.
We're friends here, and we can get kind of personal. So I'll tell you a personal story. I wrote an article for my blog and that appeared on TechCrunch called "The Strange Sex Habits of Silicon Valley." And this article got very personal. It was about how many of us here in Silicon Valley, myself included, struggle to turn off our gadgets before bed. And the result of that, the cost of being hooked to our gadgets, is that many times we don't get time with the people we love. So what I was finding in my life, and I was checking email and I was checking Twitter and Facebook into the wee hours, and I wasn't getting quality time with my wife in particular. And so what did I do? How did I fix the situation? I took a look at the hook. I took a look at these 4 basic steps of a trigger, an action, a reward, and an investment, and I tried to think, how could I break the hook, right? What was taking me through this cycle of the hook every night, hour after hour, day after day? What was doing it? And so I looked at that hook, and I tried to figure out strategically, how could I break that cycle? So here's what I did. Here's was my solution. I went to the hardware store, and I bought a $10 timer. And this timer plugs into your outlet. So it plugs into your outlet, and then you can stick whatever you want into that timer so that at whatever time you set, whatever's plugged into that timer doesn't get power anymore. And then I plugged my router into that timer. So what I was doing was breaking the hook between the trigger, this feeling of anxiety I would get every night, night after night, of am I doing enough at work, and what's going on social media, and all this anxiety I was feeling before bed. Well, to get online, to take that key action of checking my email, that was now difficult, right? Because every night at 10 o'clock, the hook was broken. The power would turn off on my router, and I couldn't go online. So that simple action with the $10 timer, by understanding what was happening, by understanding the steps of the hook, I could break that bad habit. And so that timer is something that is critical in my family, that we still keep, that we abide by that rule.
Well, I'd imagine not only are you smiling now, but so is your wife. So I think one of the first things that I heard subtly behind that was you also had to become aware of that. So you recognized that there was a pattern in place, and then you put the steps in place to interrupt that pattern. And in the interruption of that pattern, you were able to break that cycle and develop a new pattern. And so once you do that, let me ask you a question. So when we talked earlier about LIFO is last in, first out, how do you prevent yourself from saying, okay, it's worked for a day or a week or a month, which is what I call the New Year's resolution syndrome, and how do you maintain that so that becomes a well ingrained habit? Is it through repetition? What is the mechanism by which you make sure that stays and sticks?
Right. So this goes to a principle I call MIA, M-E-A, minimal enjoyable action. And then it turns out that many people fail in their resolutions, fail in creating new habits because they take on too much. So they take on, I want to lose weight, right? That's their goal. Or even, I want to lose 15 pounds. Well, losing 15 pounds is not a behavior. You can't build a habit that's lose 15 pounds. Losing 15 pounds is based on mostly what you eat, and then a little bit based on how you move, how much calories you
Right.
exert. But really, it's based on what you eat. So what I find with a lot of folks is when they try and change their habits, they try and have these big amorphous goals, these big habits that aren't placed into these very concrete behaviors. Our life is shaped by what we do day in and day out. It's not just our good intentions, it's
Right.
what we do. So we have to be very crisp and clear with what we're going to do. And my advice to people is to craft these behaviors that I call MIA, these minimal enjoyable actions. So if your goal is to exercise more, okay, make that goal something make that action, that discrete behavior that you do, something that's minimal and enjoyable. Why? Because we want to make it as likely as possible that you will actually do it. So if many people start with the goal of, I'm going to run 3 miles 5 days a week. Well, if you looked in the mirror and said, hey, is that minimal? Is that enjoyable, this action? Then that's too much.
Right.
So I say do less. So I'll give you another personal story. About 3 years ago, I had a good friend of mine that was a marathon runner. And I actually, when I was a kid, I was obese. My parents made
Wow.
me go to my parents made me go to fat camp, and I struggled with weight my whole life. And in fact, in the past couple of years, I've lost about 20, 30 pounds here. So I've struggled with weight my whole life. And back when I started this story about my friend, I would look at how he would enjoy running, and I thought he was nuts. Like, I just didn't get it. It looked so painful. Every time I tried to run, my knees would hurt. I would get sweaty. Like, there was just nothing fun about running. And it was because I had this philosophy that many of us, particularly I think in the American culture that I grew up in, it's about no pain, no gain, right? It's
Yep.
you gotta sweat, you gotta work. You don't quit. Whatever you do, don't quit. And I say the opposite. So instead of saying I'm gonna go run a marathon, my Mia was take a walk. My minimal enjoyable action, the thing that I could look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what, that's easy. And that's something that's critical. Here's the most important point, that I could do for the rest of my life. Because if you want a habit that's temporary, you're deluding yourself. That's
Right.
not a habit. A habit is going to be something that we do with little or no conscious thought forever. In fact, not doing it should be painful. That's the definition of a habit. So with these temporary resolutions of, I'll do it for a while, or I'll lose 15 pounds, and then I can eat what I was eating before. No, that's not the way it works. What we want is something that we can do that's easy, that's simple to do, that's a minimal enjoyable action that we can do for the rest of our lives. So when I
Love it.
started running, for my habit today is running. I love running. I just this morning I took a great run, and now I love it. It started from these minimal enjoyable actions of I'm going to go out on a walk. And then when I would go on a walk, that was so easy that I would maybe run for maybe 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds. But, as soon as it felt hard, as soon as it wasn't fun anymore, as soon as it wasn't enjoyable and that minimal enjoyable action was not enjoyable anymore, guess what? I went back to my Mia, which was walking. And then over time, over about the span of a year, I got up to the point where I could run for 30 minutes straight. And now I love it. Now it really pains me if I don't get to run. But that process of doing something that's minimal, that's enjoyable, and that you plan to do for the rest of your life, that's kind of the secret to forming these healthy, at least physical habits.
I love it. I actually call it fractional goal achievement. And so you take a big goal and just make it, into fractional bite-sized chunks and just do those consistently. And then you build up the tolerance and the muscle and the habit. And one of the things I love is to teach people as well is the habit is more important than the intensity. And so if you can get the habit figured out, that's going to give you the result that you want. Focus on what it's going to take to get that habit. I love the Mia concept. I wrote a couple notes over here that I want to make sure that I cover. And one of the things I wrote is the enemy of a new habit is past behaviors. And I want to just chime in on that for just a moment. When you wrote that in your book, there's a whole section on it that was really great, as well as the habit zone, which I really loved also in there. When you talk about past behaviors and the enemy of forming new habits are past behaviors, are you referring to, for the audience, the automaticity that takes place in doing what's easiest on a consistent basis versus what might seem to be a bit of an effort, which we really want to preserve our energy from a neurological perspective? Is that really what you've discovered?
Right, exactly. And this is why it's so hard to change our habits, because we literally have wired our brain. There's been myelin sheaths formed between the neurons in our brain to make these behaviors, to make these thoughts easier to occur. I mean, that's what our brain is
Right.
economizing for, to make these behaviors easy to do. And so we have to break these hooks so that whenever we're triggered, right before we take these behaviors, there's some kind of break that helps us then do a different behavior until our brain then learns that behavior.
I love that. And that's where neuroplasticity is so amazing. And what we're discovering now about the brain is we can release the habits that we have from the past and not get those neurons to fire and develop these new neural pathways and really develop these new habits, which fortunately or unfortunately is the lifeblood of what we do.
And unfortunately, that forming a habit is much harder than forming a new habit. That a lot of my work, when I consult with tech companies, and the crux of my book is really about how to help people do things they want to do. But if you look at the archetype of the companies that have become habits for so many of our lives, these are very easy behaviors, right? So using Facebook or checking our email or Twitter, these are very simple things, right? They're nowhere near the kind of level of difficulty of breaking a smoking habit or a drug addiction. Or these are breaking a habit is much more difficult than forming these easy behaviors that I describe in these tech companies.
I love it. So for all of you that have a company that has a product or service that you want to get more followers, get more people using your products, more people using your services, you have to get this book. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. You're crazy and shouldn't be in business unless you read this book, because you're wasting a lot of time trying to do something that is a lot easier to understand today. For those of you who are looking to, develop new habits, release old habits that are destructive or sabotaging, and creating a bigger gap between where you are and where you want to be, everybody go and pick up this book. All right, and as I mentioned earlier, pick up 3 copies, one for yourself, one for somebody you love, and one to give to somebody who you know needs it as well, because it's that good. And so, Nir, I'm going to give you the last say. If anybody wants to follow Nir, which I highly recommend, go to Nir and Far, N-I-R, which is how he spells his first name, nirandfar.com, and subscribe to his blog. He's got some great stuff on there. Nir, what's the last word for people who want to, follow you, get a hold of you? Well, I don't, not get a hold of you, but to follow your work.
I give time to entrepreneurs every week, actually. I have a calendar that people can book for themselves. I love talking to people working on new products, new innovations, so I make myself available every single week to whoever wants to call. So you can go through my blog to book some time with me. You can find out there's actually a special offer for the book at hookmodel.com, H-O-O-K model, M-O-D-E-L.com, which is a dedicated site for the book. There's a bunch of resources. There's free ebooks. If you get the book, and you get all this great stuff about unlocking your habit-forming potential to improve your life in other ways as well. And then through my blog, feel free to reach out if I can be helpful. Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
Awesome. Thank you, Nir. And everybody just remember, it's your choice to create an amazing life. Pay it forward. Give of your heart and soul. Be loving, caring, and kind. And do some great stuff on this earth to help everybody else. Nir, thank you so much, my friend. And everybody, get the book.